Hello, welcome to the Kelly Bailey Wellness Kitchen. It's not my kitchen, it's my mom and dad's. So they have a much better kitchen for filming. So what we're gonna do today is healthy desserts. And I have a super sweet tooth. So for me, as my health journey evolved, something that became really important was finding things that I could eat that would satisfy my sweet cravings, but still allow me to have something like after dinner, after lunch that allowed me to satisfy that craving. Because like I said, I grew up having dessert after lunch and after dinner, and I have been unable to break that habit. So for me, on my journey, it's been about finding things that work for me. And I really had to focus in when it comes to my sugar cravings on finding healthy alternatives. So today, the first thing we're gonna learn, this one is gonna take the longest. It's got a little bit more prep time than some of the other ones that we're gonna learn. This is gonna be what I call a healthy apple pie. So we're gonna get started and it's very simple. We're gonna get started by cutting up the apples. And I'll go through the ingredient list before I do that. So basically you need 2 pounds of apples, you need some balsamic vinegar, you need some honey or real maple syrup. You will need cinnamon, vanilla, and optional, you can add a little bit of rum, but you don't have to do that. And then you will also need, for your jar, which we're gonna put this in when it's all done, you want to have some oats, and if you like nuts, some chopped pecans or some almonds. So let's go ahead and get started. We are going to cut all of these apples, and basically all you want to do is you want to cut the apples, you want to skin them, and you want to cut them into chunks. When it comes to the sizing on the chunks, if you have an apple peeler, this is much easier, but I don't have one. So, but I usually do like maybe 1/2 inch chunks. I kind of slice it, and you're just going to throw these into a big pot. And so I'm going to work on cutting up all these apples. Spot on this one. So as far as the type of apple you want to use for this, it's really dependent on your taste. I tend to like a tart apple. I like a tart apple pie. So I use Granny Smith apples, but then I mix in a couple of other kinds too. So if you like a sweeter apple, then you might want to use like a Cortland or even a Red Delicious apple, which is going to yield a much sweeter dessert. But I really like the tart apples. Like I said, if you have an apple peeler, this goes a whole lot faster. But I'm not even being that careful about getting all the skin off. A little skin's not going to hurt anybody. And a lot of times I won't make a big, like I'm filling a pretty big pot of apples right here, but sometimes if I just have, if I just feel like I need a dessert on the fly, I'll just cut up a couple of apples and I'll put them in a smaller pot, and I'll I'll just make a serving for myself. But it is a lot easier if you can do a bigger pot, and that way you can kind of have some throughout the week. And these will cook down quite a bit through the stewing process. And if I'm making you nervous with the knife, I'm real sorry. My husband calls me a kamikaze in the kitchen. I have been known to cut myself. I am not a chef by training, so I'm self-taught. I don't have knife skills, but that's okay. I get it done. I just occasionally live a little dangerously. All right, we're just gonna throw all that in there. All right, I'm gonna wash off my hands here. Okay, so this is pretty simple. I've got all of my apples in the pot here, and we are gonna stew these in just a second. And so now what I'm going to do is I don't really, again, you know, if you've watched some of the other episodes, I don't tend to measure a lot of things. I like the taste, again, of balsamic vinegar, so I think it gives this a little bit of a good flavor. So probably looking at 2 tablespoons maybe, but I'm just going to kind of pour a little bit in, maybe a little bit more. Same thing with the honey. I'm going to add the honey right now, and we're probably looking at somewhere between 2 and 4 tablespoons, depending on how sweet you like it and how much sugar you want to add. So if you are trying to go lower sugar, do less of the honey, or maybe even none of the honey. I mean, the apples already have a fairly sweet, they have quite a bit of sugar in them. So as they cook down, that sugar is going to become more concentrated. So you don't need the honey necessarily. I just like to add a little bit more. Cinnamon, I like a lot of cinnamon. If you like clove, you can add ground clove to this as well. So I add quite a bit of cinnamon, but you might only want to add a shake to it. And I'm going to add a little bit of vanilla. I don't think I said this one in the beginning with the ingredients, but if you've ever made apple pie, most apple pie recipes do call for a little bit of vanilla. So I'm probably going to pour about a teaspoon in there. And then again, if you're wanting to add in a little bit of rum, I'll just splash in a slight bit of rum. And now what we're going to do is we are going to set it over onto a burner, and we're going to let this stew down. I'm going to mix it up, and we're going to let this stew down for probably about 30 minutes. And I'm not going to cover it because any liquid that starts to form, I want it to start to boil off a little bit so that it, you know, when it cools, it gets a little bit thick. All right. So I'm going to let's put it on our burner. And I'm going to put the burner, I'm probably going to start it on, I'm just going to do it on medium. Like I said, I'm not a trained chef by any means. So I'm just really kind of mixing it up here. I'll set this to the side really quickly. Let's put this over here. And then I also have a pastry cutter, and there's probably a better way to do this also, but I always use this pastry cutter, and I might just even try to get these, and you can wait until the apples are a little softer if you want to, but I usually try and get the apples, some of them to crush up a little bit more. I do like the chunks in there, but I do try and crush a few extras down. There we go. So that's probably pretty good. These will stew down pretty nicely. You'll have to stir them every so often just to make sure that they're not burning. Sugar will burn on the bottom of that pot, so, and then we'll get our jar ready. I do have one little secret ingredient that you can add if you happen to have it. If you happen to have a zester and you happen to have an orange, you can zest a little bit of orange peel in there. It's just going to give it that little bit of extra flavor. All right, not too much, but I really like that. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and let that stew. While I'm allowing that to stew, I'm going to get my jar ready. So this, if I do 2 pounds of apples and I have a jar about this size, that's probably going to end up yielding somewhere around 6 of these jars. So I'm going to take these jars. I've only got one today, but I'm going to line the jar. I have some oats. It's actually muesli. I'm going to go ahead and just drop a little bit of these oats and muesli into the bottom of my jar. And I'm going to move some of this stuff out of the way for you. And I've got some chopped pecans. I think I'm going to chop these just a little bit more. So I'm just going to chop these a little bit more. You can use a food processor for this if you want to. You don't have to add nuts either. If you don't like nuts or if you have an allergy, you don't have to do any of this. You don't even have to do the oats if you don't want to. You can just have the apples. All right, and so we're just going to put that in the bottom of our jar, and then as soon as the apples are done and they're cooled a little bit, we're going to layer that on top, and I'm going to throw it in the fridge. And then what I typically do is I whip up a quick batch of whipped cream, real whipped cream, and then I put that on top a little bit. So. All right, so our apples are stewing down so nicely and they smell so good. I'm gonna put them back on the burner. Now, I don't always make my own homemade whipped cream, but I highly encourage you to, and here's why. One of the big things about cooking at home is when you control the ingredients, you control your health. So for whipped cream today, I have heavy whipping cream, that's one ingredient, and I have honey. It's going to be 2 ingredients. Now, if you use Cool Whip, which you can do, you know, it's not like you're using a ton to top your apples. But if you look at the ingredients on the side of like a Cool Whip or a Ready Whip bottle, here's what it says: water, corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, hydrogenated vegetable oil. We want to stay away from those things, those fake fats. What else? We've got skim milk, caseinate, artificial flavors, xanthan and guar gums, modified food starch, polysorbate, 60 sorbitol. These are things I can't even pronounce. Okay, so I don't know what those things are. And if I don't know what they are they really even food? Are they edible? So the more you cook at home with ingredients from scratch, the more you're going to be able to control your health. So we are going to very quickly make our own whipped cream to top our apples with. So I'm just going to dump some heavy whipping cream in here. I'm not going to add my sweetener yet. And again, if you're trying to control sugar, you don't necessarily have to add any extra sweetener. You can just do straight up heavy whipping cream to make your whipped cream. So let's turn this on. We're going to turn it on to high. And what you'll notice as you do this, it usually takes around, I don't know, maybe 3 minutes or so. I'm probably gonna do a little bit more here, but you can see it's starting to almost form a peak as I lift the beaters out. So I'm gonna do this just a little bit longer because I want my, my whipped cream to be a little bit more stiff than that. Then I'm gonna add a little bit of the sweetener, mix it a little bit more, and I'm gonna throw it in the fridge while we're still cooking our apples down. All right, now see, it's starting to get really thick now. You can almost, you can form a peak on there. So now I'm gonna add just a little bit of honey, probably about a tablespoon, and mix that in. Take those off. So I'm going to put this in the fridge while our apples continue to cook down, and we'll use a small dollop of this to top the apples with when we're done. All right. I'm going to keep cooking those down just a little bit. All right, so now we are going to make a chocolate peanut butter mousse. Again, or it could be considered mousse, it could be considered more like a pudding. Either way, it's gonna kind of get you that sweet flavor, it's gonna give you that dessert, but in a healthier form. And so I have a box of, typical pudding that somebody would make. It's instant vanilla pudding, and we're making a chocolate variation. But again, being more health-minded, it's really important to me that I control the ingredients that are going into my body. So if you look at the ingredient list on, a box of standard pudding from your grocery store, the first ingredient is sugar. Then it's dextrose, modified cornstarch, mono and diglycerides, artificial colors, artificial flavors, tetrasodium phosphate, disodium phosphate, yellow 5 and yellow 6. These are things that you don't want to be putting into your body. So we are going to make a healthier version of a pudding or a mousse, however you want to call it. So I have plain Greek yogurt here, and this is a full fat Greek yogurt. I don't tend to use low fat variations on things. So, and again, the recipe calls for about 1/3 cup. And I'm probably going to end up using about 1/2 cup. And then you're going to want to use, so it's Greek yogurt as your ingredient list. It's Greek yogurt. You're going to need honey or maple syrup. You're going to want some vanilla. You're going to want cocoa powder, and I use 100% cacao powder. And you're going to want some peanut butter. Now, the peanut butter is not absolutely essential. So if you have a peanut allergy or you just don't like peanut butter, you don't need to use the peanut butter. And then I have some chocolate chips, I have a banana, and I also have some strawberries as a topping for this when it's done. And we've also made some homemade whipped cream, so we can add that on the top as well. So I have probably 1/3 to about 1/2 cup of my plain Greek yogurt. I'm going to take my honey, or if you want to use maple syrup, but I'm going to put sometimes the recipes will call for vanilla yogurt, which is already sweetened. But since I'm using plain, which I prefer because again, it's a single ingredient, I'm going to add a little bit more of the honey. so that we get a little bit more of that sweet flavor. Then we are going to add about 1.5 tablespoons. I'm probably going to add a little bit more of the cocoa powder just because I really like chocolate. So let's go, and you can always taste it to see. We'll add just a little bit more there. A little bit more chocolate can't ever hurt anybody. Gonna add a little bit of vanilla. So just a fuzz, probably about maybe a teaspoon or so. And then I'm gonna add some peanut butter. And I do go with a natural peanut butter. And I'm a big fan of peanut butter, so I'm probably gonna add a good 2 tablespoons here. It's gonna be a big dollop of peanut butter there. All right, get this out of the way, put that in the sink. All right, and then just gonna mix this up. And if you have a mixer, hand mixer, it can work very well for this, but just some good old elbow grease mixing it up yourself. You can, if you're dairy free, if you don't like Greek yogurt, you can also use avocado for this. You would want a food processor. So you would use about 3 avocados in place of the Greek yogurt. I know if you're not a fan of avocados, I get it, but it tastes like chocolate pudding. It's got a great texture, so I highly recommend trying it. And avocados have so much of that healthy fat for you. They're full of fiber. So you can also do this with avocado. All right. So I think if you used a hand mixer with this, you could whip a little bit more air into it and make it a little bit more like a mousse. As it is right now, it's a little bit more like a pudding. So this is going to have a lot more protein. And again, we know what all the ingredients are, so it's going to be a lot healthier. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that aside. You would want to refrigerate this, so you'd want to put an airtight container over it or a lid over it, and you do want to refrigerate that to store it. But for right now, I'm just going to set it aside, and I'm going to grab a jar. So again, I like to use these mason jars. I like something clear because if you layer it, you can make it kind of pretty. But I'm going to go ahead, and if you have fresh strawberries or fresh berries of any sort, that tends to work a little bit better. But as it is, it's winter here in Ohio right now, so I bought some frozen strawberries, and I'm just going to slice them. And I'm going to layer some of these into the bottom. They're still a little bit frozen, but that's okay. All right, layer those into the bottom. I'm going to cut up a little banana. I'm going to layer a little bit of banana in this. And if you want to get really fancy, like you have some dinner guests coming over, you could layer these into a wine glass, and you can serve this, and nobody's going to know the difference that it's a healthier dessert. So we're going to layer some of our mousse. Ooh, that's pretty thick. It is like a mousse. I said, I think if you used a hand mixer with this, you could whip a little bit more air into it, make it a little bit lighter even. Let's see, so we've got our layer, and now I'm actually going to add some more of the strawberries onto here. Some more of the bananas. All right, maybe another little strawberry here, because I love the red. It's good to make your food look pretty. All right, we will save a slice for the top. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna grab that whipped cream that we made earlier. Grab another spoon, and we are gonna throw a dollop of that whipped cream on there, and oh, we're gonna make it super pretty. Look at that. Look at that. So, I probably never make it this pretty for my family, but you can make it look very nice. You can make a nice presentation with this. Again, this is going to be a much healthier dessert than making something from a box. It's got great fiber from the fruit. It's going to have great protein from the Greek yogurt, and it's still going to give you that little bit of sweet taste that's going to kind of help you get over that sweet craving if you like to have a little something after dinner. So much healthier. All right, so for the final dessert today, it's also a very simple one, very few ingredients. I'm a huge fan of chocolate fudge. So we're gonna make a slightly healthier version. It's gonna be chocolate coconut fudge. You could also add peanut butter to this if you want. So your ingredients for this are 1 jar of coconut butter. Now, this is not coconut oil. It's coconut butter, and this stuff is not exactly easy to find. I had to order this off of Amazon. You can find it in health food stores as well, but you want coconut butter, which contains the entire fiber. So it's not just the oil, but they actually take the coconut, they just take that brown skin off, and then they pulverize the rest of it. So you're gonna take 1 jar of coconut butter. You're gonna need cocoa powder. You'll need a little bit of honey if you want to add a little bit of extra. The coconut butter actually has a fairly sweet flavor, but if you do want to add a little bit of extra sweetness, you can add a little bit of honey. And then I usually throw in a little bit of shredded coconut or coconut flakes. Sometimes I'll throw in a few nuts. Sometimes I will also throw in a few chocolate chips. And so usually this stuff is pretty hard. I've got it pretty liquid right now because it was so hard in the jar because it's cold. In the summer, coconut butter will tend to be a little softer, almost like a peanut butter. But in the winter, the coconut butter, so I actually had to throw this jar in the microwave for a second. And then, so I'll put it into a pan, and then I'm gonna add maybe, I only had about a half a jar of coconut butter, so I think I'm only gonna add about 1 tablespoon of my cocoa powder. And then I'm gonna add just a smidge of honey. I'm gonna throw in a little bit of coconut flakes because I like the coconut flavor, so it doesn't bother me to add in a few of those, add a little bit of texture to it as well. I'm gonna mix it up. Now, as of right now, because I don't even think I'm gonna need to put this on the burner because it's still, if you can see it, it's very liquid. Now, again, usually in the jar, when you get the coconut butter, it's gonna be very solid. So sometimes if I get it out of the jar and I'm putting peanut butter in with it, I will put it on the burner just to make sure everything is melted so it's easier to mix, but it's already pretty melted. So I'm just gonna mix it up. And again, it will, once it cools, it's gonna harden again, and I will actually put this in the fridge to allow it to harden. All right, so I'm gonna use a shallow dish. I said I don't even need to put this on the burner because it's already liquid. I am gonna go ahead and pour it into a shallow dish. Get it all out of there. I'm one of those people who I don't like to leave anything in the pot Gotta get all out of there. All right, set this down in here. All right. And so now you could add toppings. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a few chocolate chips. Just a little bit of that extra chocolate here. I might add just a little bit more coconut to the top. And just as a special treat, I'm a big fan of salty sweet, so I'm gonna do just a couple of, this is a pink Himalayan sea salt. I'm gonna just salt that chocolate just a smidge, and then I'm gonna cover this. And right now it's still very liquid, but I'm gonna put it in my refrigerator, and probably within an hour or so, it's going to really start to solidify, and then you can just cut it into chunks and you've got a healthier fudge. All right, now we can go ahead and finish our apples. They are all stewed down, and you can see that they've really thickened up quite a lot. All right, they're still a bit warm, so you don't have to cool them completely. But if you remember, I put oats and some nuts in the bottom of this jar. I'm gonna go ahead and throw these on the top. And if you were to let this sit for a while, so even overnight, what you're gonna find is those oats will soak up some of that apple. So whatever juice is left, get a little bit soft. All right. And then you could even sprinkle a few more nuts or oats over the top if you wanted to. And then you're gonna take that nice whipped cream that you made, and you're gonna put a dollop of that on, and you've got a healthier apple pie dessert. So those are our 3 desserts. You've got a healthier apple pie, you have a healthier chocolate mousse, and my fudge is not quite ready yet. It's still pretty liquid, but we've got a healthier fudge. And so this is how I kind of I help myself be a little bit healthier, given the fact that I have a super sweet tooth. So I hope that you found this useful. If you give any of these a try, I would love to hear from you. You can get in touch with me at Kelly Bailey Wellness, which is www.kellybailey.fit, or you can email me at kellybailey1980@gmail.com. Thanks for watching.